In the vast darkness of space, where mighty dreadnoughts patrol the galaxy and plasma cannons can vaporize entire moons, there exists one weapon so terrifying that even the most advanced alien civilizations whisper about it in fear.
It requires no fuel, no ammunition, no power source.
It cannot be jammed, hacked, or disabled by electromagnetic pulses. This weapon has ended more conflicts than all the nuclear arsenals of Earth combined, brought entire armadas to their knees, and forced proud warrior races to surrender without firing a single shot.
What is this legendary weapon that strikes terror into the hearts of beings who have conquered stars? The human hand.
Not wielding a sword or a gun, but simply extended in greeting, palm open, fingers spread in the universal gesture of peace. For in a galaxy where every species has evolved to see an open hand as either a threat display or a sign of submission, humans alone extend theirs in friendship.
And that simple difference has changed the course of galactic history forever.
This is the story of how humanity's greatest strength became the galaxy's most feared weapon, and how a gesture of peace became more powerful than any warship ever built.
Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the massive alien vessel approach through the viewport.
The ship was unlike anything in their databases, a crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around its edges, making it difficult to focus on directly.
3 months ago, humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel.
2 weeks ago, they had encountered their first alien civilization. Today, everything would change. The first contact with the Zephyrians had gone better than anyone expected. The insectoid race had initially been hostile, their chittering language full of warnings and threats. But, when Ambassador Rodriguez had stepped forward and extended his hand in the traditional human greeting, something remarkable happened. The lead Zephyrian warrior, a massive creature with blade-like appendages, had stopped mid-charge and stared at the outstretched palm.
Chen remembered watching the security footage later.
Rodriguez had stood there, completely vulnerable, hand extended toward a being that could have sliced him in half. The Zephyrian had tilted its head, studying the human gesture with what their xenobiologists later identified as confusion mixed with something else. Recognition, perhaps. Or respect. The warrior had slowly reached out with one of its own appendages, carefully touching Rodriguez's palm. The contact had lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. Within hours, the Zephyrians were sharing their star charts and warning humanity about the real dangers in the galaxy. Now, 3 weeks later, the Harmony was approaching the homeworld of the Krillian Empire, the most feared military force in this sector of space. The Zephyrians had been terrified when they learned of humanity's plan to make contact. The Krillians know only strength, their leader had chittered through the translation device. They are warriors born from warriors. Their hands are weapons, their claws instruments of death. To them, an open palm means nothing but weakness. The communications officer looked up from her station.
"Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Krillian flagship."
The main screen flickered to life, revealing a creature that looked like it had been carved from living stone. The Krillian commander stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body covered in natural armor plating. Most striking were its hands, each finger ending in a razor-sharp claw that could punch through steel.
Scars covered its face, and its eyes glowed with an inner fire that spoke of countless battles.
Human vessel, the creature spoke in perfect English, its voice like grinding granite. "I am War Leader Thrax of the 7th Talon Fleet.
You will submit to boarding and inspection, or you will be destroyed."
Chen stepped forward, aware that every eye on the bridge was watching her. The diplomatic corps had run scenarios for months, preparing for this moment. The Krillians respected only strength, and showing weakness would result in immediate destruction. But something about the Zephyrian reaction to their gesture nagged at her. "War Leader Thrax," she replied formally. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Harmony. We come in peace, seeking dialogue between our peoples." Thrax's scarred face twisted into what might have been a sneer.
"Peace is for the weak, human.
The strong take what they desire. You have 15 seconds to prepare for boarding, or we open fire."
The bridge crew tensed, hands moving toward weapons controls.
Chen could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Follow protocol and prepare for battle, or trust in something that defied all logic. "Captain," her tactical officer whispered urgently, "their weapons are charging. We should raise shields." Chen closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of Rodriguez and that moment of contact with the Zephyrian warrior. When she opened them again, her resolve was firm. "Stand down weapons," she ordered quietly. "Open a channel." "Captain," her first officer asked in alarm. "Trust me," Chen said, then stepped closer to the screen. "War Leader Thrax, I request permission to come aboard your vessel." "Alone?" The alien's eyes widened slightly. In the background, she could hear other Krillians making harsh sounds of surprise. Thrax leaned forward, his massive form filling the screen. "You would place yourself in our hands, human? Without weapons or escort?" "I would," Chen replied simply. "As a gesture of trust between our peoples." For a long moment, Thrax stared at her in silence. Chen could see intelligence behind those fierce eyes, calculations being made. Finally, the war leader spoke. "Very well. You have courage, I will grant you that. Transport to Bay 7. Come alone, as you have promised." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Chen's first officer, Commander Hayes, immediately stood. "Sarah, you can't be serious. This is suicide." "Maybe," Chen admitted, moving toward the transport pad. "But, did you see his reaction? He wasn't expecting an offer like that." "Because it's insane," Dr. Martinez, the ship's xenobiologist, interjected. "The Krillians are apex predators. They've never encountered a species that didn't either flee or fight. They don't have a concept of peaceful surrender." Chen paused at the transport controls. "Exactly. Which means we have a chance to show them something new." Minutes later, Chen materialized in the Krillian transport bay. The chamber was massive, designed to accommodate the large frames of the warrior race. Everything was angular and sharp, from the walls to the support beams. It was a space designed by beings who saw the universe as something to be conquered. She was immediately surrounded by Krillian warriors, each one towering over her, their claws gleaming in the harsh lighting. Their armor was battle-scarred and functional, and she could smell the metallic scent of old blood and weapon oil. These were beings who had known nothing but war. War Leader Thrax approached, his footsteps echoing in the chamber. Up close, he was even more imposing, his presence radiating controlled violence. He stopped just outside arm's reach, studying her with those burning eyes. "So," he rumbled, "the human comes to us defenseless. This is either great wisdom or great foolishness." Chen straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "Perhaps both." A harsh sound escaped Thrax's throat, which she realized was laughter. "You show no fear, small human. This is unexpected." "I have learned that fear often prevents us from seeing what's truly important," Chen replied. "Your people are warriors. Mine are explorers. But perhaps we have more in common than either of us realizes." Thrax tilted his head, the same gesture she had seen the Zephyrian warrior make. "Speak your words, human. What do you seek from the Krillian Empire?" This was the moment. Chen could feel the attention of every warrior in the bay focused on her. She took a breath and made the same gesture that had changed everything with the Zephyrians. She extended her hand. The reaction was immediate and electric. Warriors stepped back, their claws extending instinctively. Harsh voices filled the air as they spoke rapidly in their own language. But Chen kept her hand extended, palm open, fingers slightly spread, the universal human gesture of peaceful greeting. Thrax stared at the outstretched hand as if it were a dangerous weapon. His own clawed fingers flexed, and Chen could see the confusion in his eyes. To a species where hands were instruments of death, where claws could rend and tear, the sight of a completely open, defenseless palm was incomprehensible. What is this?" Thrax demanded, his voice uncertain for the first time. "Among my people," Chen said softly, "this is how we greet those we wish to know better. It shows that we carry no weapons, harbor no ill intent. It is an offering of trust." The war leader's eyes were fixed on her palm. She could see him struggling with concepts that had no place in his warrior culture. The other Krillians had gone silent, watching their leader with intense attention. Trust, Thrax repeated the word slowly, as if tasting something foreign. You offer your most vulnerable extremity to those who could destroy it without thought. Yes, Chen said simply. For what felt like an eternity, Thrax stood frozen. Chen could see the internal battle playing out across his scarred features. Everything in his warrior instincts told him to see this as weakness, something to exploit. But something else, something deeper, recognized the profound courage it took to make such a gesture. Slowly, almost reverently, Thrax raised his own hand. His claws retracted partially, and, with infinite care, he touched his palm to hers. The contact was brief, barely a second, but Chen felt something pass between them. Understanding, perhaps. Or the first tentative bridge across the vast gulf between their species. When they separated, Thrax stared at his own hand as if seeing it for the first time. Around the bay, the other warriors were making soft sounds, their own language subdued and wondering. This gesture, Thrax said quietly. Your people use this commonly? Every day, Chen confirmed. We shake hands when we meet, when we part, when we make agreements. It's one of our oldest customs. Thrax's eyes met hers again, and she saw something that hadn't been there before. Curiosity. And, in all your history, this has been a sign of peace? Chen nodded. For as long as we have records. The war leader was quiet for a long moment, then turned to address his warriors in their own language. The conversation was brief but intense, with several warriors gesturing toward Chen and her still extended hand. Finally, Thrax turned back to her. Captain Chen of the Earth humans, he said formally, the Krillian Empire recognizes that you have shown us something we had not seen before. This, handshaking. It intrigues us. Relief flooded through Chen, though she kept her expression neutral. I am honored by your interest, war leader. You will remain as our guest while we consider what we have learned today. Thrax paused, then added something that sent chills down Chen's spine. Tell me, Captain, how many other species in this galaxy share this custom of yours? None that we've encountered, Chen admitted. Each species we've met has their own ways of greeting. Thrax's eyes gleamed with an intensity that was both fascinating and terrifying. Indeed. How very unique you humans are. As Chen was escorted to guest quarters aboard the Krillian flagship, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just set in motion something far larger than a simple diplomatic exchange. The way Thrax had looked at her hand, the reverence with which he had touched it, the questions he had asked about other species. In her quarters, a space that was surprisingly comfortable despite the angular Krillian aesthetic, Chen sent a coded message back to the Harmony. First contact successful. Beginning cultural exchange. But, even as she sent the positive report, a nagging worry grew in her mind. The Krillians were warriors who respected strength above all else. But, what happened when a race of warriors discovered that the galaxy's newest species possessed what they would see as the ultimate display of courage? What happened when beings who lived by the sword encountered those who lived by the handshake? Over the next several days, Chen found herself the center of intense attention from the Krillian military hierarchy. Word of the handshake had spread through the fleet, and she was constantly asked to demonstrate the gesture, to explain its meaning, to detail how humans used it in various situations. Each time she extended her hand, the reaction was the same. Awe, confusion, and something that looked very much like fear. Not fear of the gesture itself, but fear of what it represented. In a galaxy where every species had evolved some form of threat display or submission ritual, the human handshake stood alone as something entirely different. Dr. Martinez had been right in her assessment. The Krillians, like most predator species, had no concept of peaceful surrender that didn't involve submission. Their version of greeting involved displaying claws, showing strength, establishing dominance. But the human handshake did none of these things. It was pure vulnerability offered freely, trust given without guarantee of reciprocation. On her third day aboard the Krillian flagship, war leader Thrax summoned her to his private chambers. The space was spartanly furnished but impressive in its scale, with weapons and trophies from countless battles adorning the walls. Thrax stood before a massive viewport, looking out at the stars. "Captain Chen," he said without turning around, "we have been in contact with other fleets throughout the Empire. Word of your demonstration has spread far." Chen felt a chill of apprehension. "I hope it has not caused problems." Thrax turned then, and his expression was unreadable. "Problems? No, Captain. Quite the opposite. Every warrior commander in the Empire wishes to see this human handshake for themselves." The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. "War leader, I should explain that the handshake is just one aspect of human culture. It doesn't define us entirely. But it reveals something fundamental, does it not?" Thrax moved closer, his presence filling the room. "A species that leads with vulnerability rather than strength. That offers trust before receiving it. This is unprecedented." "It's just who we are," Chen said quietly. "Just who you are," Thrax repeated thoughtfully. "Do you understand what you have shown us, Captain? In a galaxy where might makes right, where the strong prey upon the weak, you have revealed a species that chooses to appear weak as an expression of strength." Chen realized that Thrax understood the handshake better than she had expected. "I wouldn't say we appear weak. We simply choose to show that we mean no harm. And that choice," Thrax said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "requires a kind of courage that no Krillian has ever possessed." The conversation continued late into the ship's night cycle, with Thrax asking detailed questions about human society, their approach to conflict resolution, their history of cooperation and warfare. Chen answered as honestly as she could, but she began to understand that something momentous was happening. The handshake hadn't just impressed the Krillians. It had fundamentally challenged their worldview. For a warrior race that had built their entire civilization on the concept that strength was the ultimate virtue, encountering a species that found strength in apparent vulnerability was earth-shattering. When Chen finally returned to her quarters, she found a message waiting from the Harmony. Admiral Foster, her commanding officer, had sent new orders. Similar encounters were happening throughout human space. Every alien species they encountered had the same reaction to the handshake: fascination, confusion, and something approaching reverence. But the message that truly concerned her came from the Zephyrian delegation. They reported that word of the human greeting was spreading through the galactic communication networks faster than any military intelligence had ever traveled. Species that had never heard of Earth were already debating the implications of a race that extended open palms instead of weapons. Chen stared out at the stars, realizing that humanity had inadvertently stumbled onto something that could reshape the entire galactic order. The simple gesture of extending an open hand, something so natural to humans that children did it instinctively, was being interpreted by alien species as the most profound act of courage they had ever witnessed. The question was, what would the galaxy do with that knowledge? Admiral Marcus Foster stood in the Situation Room aboard Earth's primary orbital station, staring at a three-dimensional map of known space that was updating in real time. Red dots marked hostile alien territories, yellow indicated neutral zones, and green showed friendly or allied space. 6 months ago, the map had been almost entirely red. Today, it was transforming before his eyes. The changes had started slowly after Captain Chen's successful contact with the Krillians. Word of the human handshake had begun spreading through galactic communication networks, carried by traders, diplomats, and military observers. But what had started as curious gossip had quickly become something much more significant. Admiral Lieutenant Commander Park called from her station, were receiving another request for diplomatic contact. This time from the hegemony of Razor Worlds. Foster's eyebrows rose. The Razor Worlds were notorious for their xenophobia and had refused all contact attempts for over 2 centuries. They were a collection of fortress planets ruled by beings that resembled crystalline spiders, each one capable of cutting through steel with their naturally occurring blade appendages. "What's their message?" Foster asked. Park read from her display. "They request the presence of a human delegation to, and, I quote, witness the gesture of the open palm and determine its authenticity.
Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief xenopsychologist, looked up from her research notes.
That's the 15th request this week, Admiral. Every species wants to see the handshake for themselves.
Foster moved to the central display, watching as communication traffic flowed between star systems.
The volume had increased by over 300% since Chen's encounter with the Krillians. Alien civilizations that hadn't spoken to each other in millennia were suddenly exchanging messages about humanity's greeting customs.
"What's the latest from our field teams?" Foster asked.
Commander Sarah Mitchell, recently promoted to head of diplomatic operations, stepped forward with a tablet full of reports.
"The results are consistent across all species we've encountered.
The handshake produces the same reaction every time: fear, awe, confusion, and something approaching religious reverence."
She activated a holographic display showing various alien encounters.
The Vorthan Collective, a hive mind species, went completely silent for 3 days after Ambassador Williams shook hands with their speaker node.
When they finally responded, they declared that humans possessed the courage of the void itself.
The next image showed a meeting with the Titan Forge Empire, a race of mechanical beings.
The Titan Forged response was even more dramatic.
They immediately began retrofitting their hand appendages to match human proportions, believing that the gesture requires specific finger configurations to work properly.
Foster shook his head in amazement. "And the Phantom Syndicate?"
Mitchell's expression grew serious. "That's where things get interesting, Admiral.
The Phantoms are known throughout the galaxy as information brokers.
They sell intelligence to the highest bidder and maintain strict neutrality in all conflicts." She brought up a recording of the encounter. The Phantom representative was a translucent being that seemed to shift between dimensions, its form never quite solid.
Ambassador Torres stood before it in what appeared to be an empty space station. "The Phantom actually paid us for the demonstration," Mitchell continued.
2 million credits and a complete star chart of the Outer Rim territories. They said the handshake was information of unprecedented value and began immediately broadcasting details to their entire client network.
Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. "Admiral, we need to understand what we're dealing with here. I've been analyzing the psychological profiles of every species we've encountered, and there's a pattern."
She activated her own presentation, showing evolutionary trees and behavioral matrices. Every sentient species in the galaxy has evolved from either predators or prey animals. Predator species, like the Krillians, develop dominance displays.
Prey species develop submission signals.
Both types have appendages that are primarily defensive or offensive weapons.
The display showed various alien hand analogs.
Claws, pincers, blade appendages, crushing grippers, all designed for either attack or defense.
"Humans are unique," Vasquez continued.
"Our hands evolved for tool use and manipulation, not as weapons.
When we extend an open palm, we're displaying our most valuable survival asset in a completely vulnerable position.
To other species, this appears to be the ultimate act of trust and courage." Foster studied the data, beginning to understand the magnitude of what was happening.
"So they see the handshake as a demonstration of supreme confidence?"
"More than that," Vasquez replied. "They see it as proof that humans are so powerful, so confident in their abilities, that they can afford to show complete vulnerability to potential enemies. It's like a master swordsman throwing away his weapon before a duel to prove his superiority."
The implications were staggering.
Humanity had accidentally created the impression that they were the most fearless and powerful species in the galaxy, all through a simple gesture of friendship.
"Admiral," Park called out urgently, "priority transmission from the Galactic Trade Consortium."
The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that looked like a cross between a merchant and a mollusk. The consortium representative spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes.
"Greetings, Admiral Foster. I am Trademaster Quellion of the Galactic Trade Consortium. We have a proposition for your species that we believe will be mutually beneficial." Foster stepped forward. "I'm listening, Trademaster."
"The consortium has been monitoring the cultural exchange surrounding your greeting customs. We have received inquiries from over 400 species requesting trade negotiations with humanity, specifically to experience this handshake phenomenon firsthand. The number hit Foster like a physical blow. 400 species was more alien contact than humanity had expected to make in a century. We propose a formal trade exposition, Quellion continued, held at the consortium's neutral station at the galactic crossroads. Representatives from across the galaxy would attend, ostensibly for commerce, but actually to witness and experience human greeting customs. The economic benefits to your species would be considerable. After the transmission ended, Foster found himself staring at the star map again. The implications of Quellion's offer were enormous. Humanity could potentially establish trade relationships with hundreds of alien civilizations simultaneously. The technological and economic benefits would advance human civilization by centuries. But there were risks. Dr. Vasquez had been studying the psychological effects of the handshake encounters, and her findings were concerning. "Admiral," she said quietly, "we need to consider the potential consequences. Several species have begun referring to humans as the open palm warriors or the fearless ones. Some have started incorporating handshake-like gestures into their own cultures, believing it will make them more courageous." She showed images from various worlds where aliens were attempting to mimic human greetings, often with disastrous results. The Krillians have begun trying to retract their claws when meeting each other, which has led to several accidental injuries. The Zephyrians have started approaching enemies with extended appendages, believing it will intimidate them. Foster realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, the rapid spread of a cultural phenomenon across the galaxy. But, instead of technology or ideas, it was a simple gesture that was reshaping how entire civilizations viewed courage and social interaction. "What about the military implications?" Foster asked. Commander Mitchell brought up a new set of reports. "That's where things get really interesting, Admiral. Several warrior races have begun requesting military exchanges with Earth. They want to learn how humans can be so confident in their superiority that they're willing to show vulnerability to enemies." The irony wasn't lost on Foster. Humanity's greatest military advantage might be the fact that other species thought humans were too powerful to fear anyone. "The Krillian Empire has proposed a formal military alliance," Mitchell continued. "War leader Thrax has stated that any species capable of the open palm gesture must possess weapons and tactics so advanced that conventional threats are meaningless to them." And our response? We're in a difficult position. If we reveal that the handshake is just a friendly greeting with no military significance, we lose the psychological advantage. But, if we maintain the impression that it represents supreme military confidence, we're essentially bluffing against civilizations that could crush us if they discover the truth. Foster walked to the viewport, looking out at the blue curve of Earth below. Somewhere down there, children were learning to shake hands, completely unaware that their simple gesture was being interpreted as the most fearsome display of power in the galaxy. "Sir," Park called out, "incoming transmission from Captain Chen aboard the Krillian flagship." Chen's image appeared on the main screen, and Foster could see the stress in her expression despite her professional composure. "Admiral, we have a situation developing here. War leader Thrax has called a gathering of the Empire's top military commanders. They want to discuss what they're calling the human doctrine and how it might change galactic warfare." Foster leaned forward. "Explain, Captain." "They believe that the handshake represents a fundamental shift in military thinking," Chen replied. "The idea that a species could be so supremely confident in their power that they would lead with apparent vulnerability has shaken the foundation of Krillian military philosophy." "What are they planning?" "That's what concerns me, Admiral. Thrax has suggested that the Krillian Empire should adopt human-style diplomatic approaches. He wants to begin offering open palm gestures to their enemies before battles, believing it will either terrify them into surrender or force them to reveal their own weapons prematurely." The absurdity of the situation hit Foster full force. The galaxy's most aggressive warrior race was planning to reform their entire military strategy based on a misunderstanding of human nature. "There's more," Chen continued. "The Krillians have been in communication with other military powers throughout the galaxy. They're sharing their analysis of human tactical psychology. Every major fleet commander wants to understand how humans can afford to show such confidence.
After Chen's transmission ended, Foster called an emergency meeting of Earth's Security Council. Within hours, representatives from every major Earth government were participating via secure link. President Martinez of the United Earth Alliance spoke first. "Admiral, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Are we looking at an opportunity or a threat?"
"Both," Foster replied honestly. "If we handle this correctly, humanity could become the most influential species in the galaxy overnight. If we mismanage it, we could provoke conflicts we're not prepared to handle." Dr. Vasquez presented her latest findings to the Council. The psychological impact of the handshake goes beyond individual encounters. It's creating a galaxy-wide reassessment of what constitutes strength and weakness. Species that have been enemies for millennia are communicating about humans. Others are questioning their own cultural assumptions about power. Secretary of State Williams raised a critical point. What happens when they realize the truth? That humans aren't supremely powerful beings who use handshakes to demonstrate their invincibility, but rather a relatively new species that simply developed different social customs? The question hung in the air like a sword over their heads. Foster had been grappling with the same concern for weeks. "That's the million-credit question," he admitted. "Do we maintain the deception, knowing it could eventually backfire catastrophically? Or do we reveal the truth and lose what might be our only chance to establish ourselves as a major galactic power?" Chancellor Kim from the Asian Federation raised another concern. "We also need to consider the ethical implications. We're allowing entire civilizations to reshape their cultures based on false assumptions about our intentions." The debate continued for hours, with no easy answers emerging. Some council members argued for full disclosure, believing that honest relationships would serve humanity better in the long term. Others pushed for maintaining the current situation, pointing out that it was giving humanity influence and respect that would take centuries to earn otherwise. Finally, President Martinez called for a temporary adjournment. "We need more information before making this decision. Admiral, I want comprehensive reports on every species we've encountered, their reactions to the handshake, and projected outcomes for both transparency and continued ambiguity." As the council session ended, Foster remained in the Situation Room, staring at the galactic map. The changes were accelerating. More species were requesting contact every day, and some were already implementing their own versions of human diplomatic protocols. Lieutenant Commander Park approached with the latest intelligence reports. "Admiral, there's something else you should see. Our long-range monitoring stations have detected unusual activity in several previously isolated sectors." She brought up a display showing deep space energy signatures. These are species that have had no contact with galactic civilization for centuries. But they're suddenly broadcasting messages and mobilizing fleets. All the traffic we've intercepted mentions humans and the open palm gesture. Foster felt a chill run down his spine. How far has the word spread? Based on communication traffic analysis, Dr. Martinez estimates that over 90% of known galactic civilizations have now heard about the human handshake. Some are interpreting it as a sign that humanity plans to establish galactic dominance. Others see it as a herald of a new age of peace. The map updated again, showing communication lines spreading like wildfire across the galaxy. Humanity had inadvertently become the center of galactic attention, and Foster wasn't sure whether that was humanity's greatest opportunity or its greatest danger. As he watched the real-time updates flow across the display, one thing became clear. The age of human isolation was over. Whether humanity was ready or not, they had become players on the galactic stage. And it had all started with a simple, friendly handshake. The neutral station at Crossroads Point was the largest artificial structure humanity had ever encountered. Built by the Galactic Trade Consortium over several centuries, it served as a hub for commerce between the galaxy's diverse species. The station was massive enough to have its own weather systems in the central habitat rings, and complex enough to house representatives from species with completely incompatible environmental requirements. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood in the observation deck of the human diplomatic vessel, watching as ship after ship approached the station. The variety was staggering. crystalline vessels that seemed to sing as they moved through space, organic ships that looked like massive space-dwelling creatures, mechanical constructs that defied conventional physics, and stranger craft that hurt to look at directly. Final count, Ambassador, her aide, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, reported. 473 distinct species have sent representatives to attend what they're officially calling the Trade Exposition, but which everyone knows is really about witnessing the human handshake. Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. It had been 8 months since Captain Chen's first encounter with the Krillians, and the phenomenon had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as diplomatic curiosity had become a galaxy-wide cultural event. "Any word from Earth on our approach?" Rodriguez asked. "Admiral Foster confirms our instructions remain the same," Kim replied. "Proceed with diplomatic contact, but gather as much intelligence as possible about how our greeting is being interpreted by different species." The decision had been made at the highest levels of Earth government after weeks of debate. Rather than reveal the truth about the handshake's simple origins, humanity would use this opportunity to establish relationships with as many species as possible while carefully studying how their gesture was being perceived across different cultures. As their ship docked with the station, Rodriguez reviewed the extensive briefing materials her team had prepared. The species attending this gathering represented every major political and military power in the galaxy, along with hundreds of smaller civilizations that had never before shown interest in galactic affairs. The Krillian Empire had sent a full diplomatic fleet, led by war leader Thrax himself. The insectoid Zephyrians had arrived with their entire ruling council. Most surprisingly, the enigmatic Phantom Syndicate had sent not just representatives, but had offered to provide real-time intelligence about how each species was reacting to human interactions. "Ambassador," Kim said as they prepared to disembark, "there's something you should know." Station security reports that several species have already attempted to practice their own versions of the handshake. The results have been problematic. How problematic? Kim handed her a datapad with incident reports. The Clockin tribes tried to modify their greeting clause to be less threatening, but ended up injuring several of their own diplomats. The Ethereal Collective attempted to solidify their energy forms into hand-like appendages, which caused 3 of them to lose cohesion entirely. And the Stone Lords carved their hands down to mimic human proportions, which they now regret since they can't regenerate the lost material. Rodriguez sighed. The unintended consequences of their cultural influence were growing more serious by the day. Species across the galaxy were literally reshaping themselves to try to achieve what they saw as human-level courage and confidence. The docking process completed, Rodriguez and her small team stepped into the station's main diplomatic ring. The environment was carefully controlled to accommodate the widest range of species possible, with multiple atmosphere zones and gravity fields. The first thing that struck her was the noise, hundreds of different languages, communication methods, and translator devices all operating simultaneously. The second thing she noticed was the immediate attention their arrival commanded. Conversation stopped, and beings of every conceivable shape and size turned to stare at the human delegation. Rodriguez could feel the weight of their expectations, their curiosity, and, in some cases, their fear. Trademaster Quellion of the Galactic Trade Consortium approached, his form shimmering between solid and gaseous states. "Ambassador Rodriguez, welcome to Crossroads Point. Your arrival has been anticipated with great interest." "Thank you, Trademaster. We're honored to participate in this gathering." Quellion's expression was unreadable, but his tone carried undertones of nervous excitement. "Indeed. Perhaps we should begin with a formal introduction to the assembled representatives? They are most eager to witness the human diplomatic protocols firsthand." Rodriguez agreed, and soon found herself standing before an enormous amphitheater filled with alien representatives. The diversity was overwhelming. Beings of crystalline, metallic, organic, and purely energy-based compositions filled the seats. Some hung from the ceiling in specialized harnesses, while others existed in containment fields that protected the rest of the audience from their exotic physics. "Honored representatives," Rodriguez began, her voice amplified by the station's translation system, "I am Ambassador Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Alliance. We come in peace, seeking understanding and cooperation between our peoples and yours. A murmur of anticipation rippled through the audience. Rodriguez could see them leaning forward, waiting for what they had all come to witness. As is our custom, she continued, stepping forward, I offer this greeting to all assembled here. She extended her right hand, palm open, fingers slightly spread. The reaction was immediate and electric. The amphitheater erupted in a cacophony of sounds, languages, and communication methods as species reacted to seeing the legendary human gesture in person. Rodriguez held the position for several seconds, allowing the audience to study the posture, the positioning, the apparent vulnerability of the gesture. When she lowered her hand, the amphitheater fell into stunned silence. A being that resembled a walking tree, covered in bark-like armor and, wielding natural spear appendages, stood slowly. Human ambassador, it spoke in a voice like wind through leaves, we are the Thornkin hierarchy. For 3,000 years, we have known only the greeting of raised spears. To extend a weaponless appendage to strangers is beyond our understanding. And, yet, Rodriguez replied gently, it is how we choose to meet new friends. A creature from the back of the amphitheater called out, its voice translated as a series of harmonic tones. The singing crystals ask, do you not fear that others will interpret this gesture as a challenge? That they will strike at your exposed appendage? Sometimes they do, Rodriguez admitted. But, we have found that most beings, when offered trust, choose to respond with trust in return. This statement caused another wave of discussion throughout the amphitheater. Rodriguez could see representatives making rapid notes, sending communications to their home worlds, and engaging in heated discussions with their companions. A massive, heavily armored being near the front stood next. Rodriguez recognized it as a representative of the Iron Legion, a mechanized warrior race known for their brutality. Human, I am Battlecorps Zephox of the Iron Legion. Your gesture implies that you fear no retaliation from those you greet. This suggests either supreme arrogance or supreme power. Rodriguez chose her words carefully. It suggests trust, Battlecorps Zephox. We believe that showing trust encourages others to be trustworthy. But, what, the mechanical being pressed, if they prove unworthy of that trust? Then, we learn something important about them, Rodriguez replied simply. This answer seemed to confuse the Iron Legion representative even more than the handshake itself. The concept that humans would willingly accept vulnerability for the purpose of gathering information about others was apparently incomprehensible to a species that viewed all social interaction as a form of warfare. Over the next several hours, Rodriguez found herself demonstrating the handshake to individual species representatives. Each encounter was carefully observed by dozens of others, and she began to notice patterns in their reactions. Predator species, like the Krillians and Iron Legion, interpreted the gesture as a display of supreme confidence, believing that only beings with overwhelming power could afford to show such vulnerability. Prey species saw it as either a dominance display or a test of courage. Hive minds found it incomprehensible that individuals would make such personal gestures. Energy beings were fascinated by the physical nature of the contact. But, most interestingly, several species began asking about the meaning behind the gesture, not just its execution. The Wisdom Keepers, an ancient race of scholars, approached her with particularly thoughtful questions. Ambassador Rodriguez, their eldest representative, said, we have studied the recordings of your gesture extensively. We believe there are deeper implications than mere greeting customs. What do you mean? Rodriguez asked. The positioning of your digits, the angle of presentation, the duration of contact, all suggest a complex social protocol with multiple layers of meaning. We theorize that your species has encoded information about status, intentions, and emotional state into this single gesture. Rodriguez realized that the aliens were attributing far more complexity to the handshake than actually existed. They were reverse engineering meaning that simply wasn't there, creating elaborate theories about human social psychology based on misinterpretations. I'm curious about your analysis, she replied diplomatically. We believe, the Wisdom Keeper continued, that the human handshake is actually a rapid information exchange system. The duration of contact, the pressure applied, the positioning of the thumb all convey specific data about the participant's intentions, capabilities, and social standing. Several other species representatives had gathered to listen to this theory, and Rodriguez could see them taking notes furiously. They were creating an entire mythology around the simple act of shaking hands. As the day progressed, Rodriguez participated in formal meetings with representatives from various political blocs and military alliances. The conversations revealed just how profoundly the handshake had affected galactic political thinking. The Neutral Worlds Alliance, a collection of peaceful species that had remained isolated from galactic conflicts, had begun debating whether to adopt human-style diplomatic approaches. Their representative, a being that resembled a floating jellyfish, explained their reasoning. For millennia, we have avoided contact with aggressive species by demonstrating our harmlessness. But the human approach suggests a different strategy, showing strength through apparent vulnerability. If this proves effective, it could revolutionize how peaceful species interact with potential threats. The military implications were even more significant. Representatives from several warrior races had begun discussing what they called the human doctrine, a complete reimagining of combat psychology based on the handshake's perceived meaning. War leader Thrax, who had become something of a human culture expert among the Krillians, presented his analysis to a gathering of military representatives. The human greeting protocol suggests a species that has achieved such mastery of warfare that they no longer need to display threatening intent. This implies weapon systems and tactical capabilities beyond our current understanding. Rodriguez watched in fascination as Thrax demonstrated his interpretation of the handshake to other warrior race representatives. Observe the complete exposure of the manipulator appendage. No armor, no weapons, no defensive positioning. Only a species with absolute confidence in their ability to destroy any threat could afford such a display. The discussion that followed was both enlightening and terrifying. Military commanders from across the galaxy were debating how to respond to a species that they believed possessed unimaginable destructive capabilities, all because humans had evolved to shake hands as a greeting. During a private meeting with Trademaster Quellion, Rodriguez learned about the broader economic implications of the handshake phenomenon. The effect on galactic commerce has been unprecedented, Quellion explained. Species that have refused trade contact for centuries are suddenly opening their borders, hoping to attract human attention. Others are attempting to incorporate handshaking into their own cultures to appear more attractive to human traders. What kind of trade offers are we receiving? Quellion's form shimmered with what Rodriguez had learned indicated excitement. Resource extraction rights to entire star systems, exclusive access to technologies that other species have kept secret for millennia, military alliances that would make humanity one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The scope of what was being offered was staggering. Humanity could advance their civilization by thousands of years simply by accepting the trades being offered by species who believed humans possessed extraordinary capabilities. But there's a risk, Quellion continued. Several aggressive species are beginning to view humanity as a potential threat. They're interpreting the handshake as a declaration of hostile intent, a statement that humans are so powerful they can afford to mock their enemies openly. This was exactly what Rodriguez had been afraid of. The same gesture that was opening diplomatic doors was also being interpreted as a threat by some species. If enough militaristic civilizations decided that humanity represented a danger that needed to be eliminated, Earth could face attacks from enemies they were completely unprepared to fight. That evening, Rodriguez attended a cultural exchange event where representatives from different species attempted to share their own greeting customs. The results were both hilarious and sobering. The spike dancers, a species with naturally occurring bone protrusions, attempted to demonstrate their traditional greeting of interlocking spines. Several representatives from soft-bodied species had to be treated for puncture wounds. The heat singers, beings composed of living plasma, tried to show their custom of sharing thermal energy, which resulted in temporary evacuations when the temperature in their section of the hall spiked to dangerous levels. Through it all, Rodriguez found herself the center of attention as species after species requested demonstrations of the handshake, each interaction carefully observed and analyzed by dozens of others. She began to feel like an exhibit in a galactic museum, a representative of a phenomenon that had taken on a life of its own. The most surreal moment came when a representative of the Dream Weavers, a species that communicated through shared hallucinations, asked if they could experience the handshake through their telepathic abilities. The resulting mental contact gave Rodriguez a brief glimpse of how the alien perceived the gesture, and what she experienced shook her to her core. To the Dreamweaver, the handshake appeared as a blazing star of courage, surrounded by an aura of unfathomable confidence and power. The alien's perception transformed the simple gesture into something mythical, a manifestation of warrior spirit so pure that it transcended physical reality. When the telepathic contact ended, the Dreamweaver representative stood in silent reverence for several minutes before speaking. Your species carries the light of the eternal warrior within their souls. We are humbled to have witnessed such glory. As the cultural exchange continued late into the station's night cycle, Rodriguez realized that the situation had evolved far beyond anything Earth's leaders had anticipated. Humanity wasn't just being misunderstood, they were being transformed into legend. The handshake had become a symbol that meant different things to different species, but, in every case, it represented something far more significant than its simple origins suggested. When she finally returned to her quarters, Rodriguez sent a detailed report to Admiral Foster. Her conclusions were both encouraging and deeply concerning. Humanity now had the opportunity to establish themselves as a major galactic power, with trade agreements and military alliances that would secure their future for millennia. But they were also walking a tightrope. The same reputation that was opening doors could eventually lead to conflicts with species who viewed humanity's perceived power as a threat. And, underneath it all was the persistent question of what would happen when the galaxy discovered that the most feared gesture in galactic history was nothing more than a simple expression of human friendliness. As Rodriguez drifted off to sleep, she could hear the station's communication systems humming with activity. Across the galaxy, the ripples from the day's events were spreading, carrying news of the human handshake demonstration to every corner of known space. Whatever happened next, she knew that humanity's place in the galactic community had been forever changed by a gesture that took less than 5 seconds to perform. Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the incoming transmission with growing dread. After 18 months of watching the handshake phenomenon spread across the galaxy, she had always known this moment would come. The message was from Professor Ixthak of the Analytical Collective, one of the galaxy's most respected research institutions. Dr. Vasquez, the alien's translated voice was calm but carried undertones of scientific excitement. We have completed our comprehensive study of human greeting protocols. We believe we have discovered something of significant importance regarding your species' true nature. Admiral Foster, Captain Chen, and the rest of Earth's crisis management team listened as the transmission continued. Professor Ixthak, a being that resembled a collection of floating geometric shapes, presented its findings with methodical precision. Our analysis involved studying every recorded instance of the human handshake gesture across 847 different encounters with various species. We examined physiological responses, gesture variations, duration patterns, and contextual applications. The holographic display showed complex mathematical models and behavioral analysis charts. Dr. Vasquez felt her heart sinking as she realized where this was heading. Based on our extensive research, Professor Ixthak continued, we have reached a conclusion that contradicts the prevailing galactic understanding of this gesture's significance. Foster leaned forward, his face grim. Go on. The human handshake appears to be exactly what humans claim it to be, a simple greeting custom with no hidden military significance, no coded information transfer, and no demonstration of superior power. It is, in scientific terms, precisely as harmless as it appears. The silence in the Earth Command Center was deafening. After months of watching the galaxy transform itself based on misinterpretations of human nature, the truth was finally being discovered by one of the most credible research institutions in known space. Professor, Dr. Vasquez finally responded, what led you to this conclusion? Multiple factors, Ixthak replied. First, the gesture shows no variation based on the perceived threat level of the recipient. Humans extend identical greetings to harmless civilian populations and heavily armed military commanders. Second, human children perform this gesture instinctively, without training or apparent understanding of its supposed psychological warfare applications. The alien researcher continued, its analysis devastatingly accurate. Most significantly, we conducted covert observations of humans interacting with their own species.
The gesture appears in casual, non-threatening contexts with remarkable frequency.
Its usage patterns are consistent with social bonding behavior, not dominance displays or tactical demonstrations.
Foster rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the impending crisis. Professor Ixthak, what are your intentions regarding these findings?
As members of the scientific community, we are obligated to share accurate information with all interested parties.
We will be presenting our conclusions at the Galactic Research Symposium next week. Every major civilization in the galaxy will have access to our data.
After the transmission ended, the command center erupted in urgent discussions.
The implications were staggering.
Once the truth about the handshake spread, humanity would lose the respect and fear that had elevated them to major power status in less than 2 years.
How long do we have? Foster asked.
Captain Shen, who had become Earth's foremost expert on alien psychology during her extended stays with various species, answered grimly. The Analytical Collective's research symposiums are attended by representatives from over 600 civilizations. Within days of their presentation, every major power in the galaxy will know that we've been unintentionally deceiving them.
What kind of reaction can we expect?
Foster pressed. Dr. Vasquez had been studying this exact scenario for months. It depends on the species, but none of the outcomes are good. The warrior races will feel humiliated that they were awed by what they'll see as a meaningless gesture. The political entities will feel manipulated, even though the deception was unintentional.
The scientific communities will be fascinated but disappointed. And the military implications?
Catastrophic, Chen replied bluntly. Several aggressive species have been holding back from expansion because they believed humanity possessed overwhelming military capabilities.
Once they realize we're just a young species with unusual social customs, some of them may decide we're an easy target for conquest.
Foster activated the emergency communication system, connecting directly to the highest levels of Earth's government. Within hours, President Martinez, Secretary of State Williams, and defense ministers from every major nation were participating in the most critical strategy session in human history.
How do we contain this? President Martinez asked without preamble.
We can't, Dr. Vasquez replied. The Analytical Collective has already distributed preliminary findings to their network. Even if we could somehow prevent their presentation, which we can't, too many people already know.
Secretary Williams posed the question everyone was thinking. What are our options?
We can try to control the narrative, suggested General Park from the military contingent.
Claim that the Analytical Collective's research is flawed, that there are hidden aspects to the handshake they didn't discover.
That would require us to fabricate evidence about our own culture, Dr. Vasquez pointed out.
And it would involve deceiving the galaxy's most respected scientific institution. The long-term consequences could be even worse than the truth.
We could attempt a preemptive strike, suggested Admiral Reeves from the Space Defense Force. Strike against the most aggressive species before they realize our vulnerability. The suggestion was met with immediate opposition.
With what?
Foster asked pointedly. Our most advanced warships are barely capable of fighting a single Krillian cruiser, let alone the entire galaxy.
And attacking now would confirm that we've been deliberately deceiving everyone.
As the debate continued, reports began flooding in from human diplomatic missions throughout the galaxy. The preliminary findings from the Analytical Collective were already creating ripples of concern and confusion among alien populations. Ambassador Rodriguez transmitted from the station at Crossroads Point, where she had remained as humanity's primary diplomatic representative. The reaction here is immediate and concerning. Several species representatives are demanding explanations. The Krillians are particularly agitated, requesting emergency meetings to discuss what they're calling the revelation of human deception.
From the Zephyrian homeworld, Ambassador Torres reported similar concerns.
The Zephyrian leadership feels betrayed. They've spent the past year restructuring their military doctrine based on what they believed were human tactical principles. Discovering that it was all based on a misunderstanding has shaken their confidence in their own decision-making. But the most alarming report came from Captain Harrison, stationed with the Titan Forge Empire. The mechanical beings are experiencing what their analysts are calling a logic cascade failure. Their entire worldview is built on rational analysis, and discovering that they completely misinterpreted human behavior has caused some of them to shut down entirely. Their leadership is questioning every assumption they've ever made about organic species. As the crisis deepened, an unexpected communication arrived from Trademaster Quellion of the Galactic Trade Consortium. A holographic projection showed the alien merchant in what appeared to be a state of agitated excitement. "Admiral Foster," Quellion said, his form shifting colors rapidly, "I have urgent information regarding the current situation. The analytical collective's findings have created an unprecedented opportunity." "How so?" Foster asked cautiously. "The revelation that humans have been unknowingly honest in their interactions has produced a fascinating effect. Many species are interpreting this not as deception, but as proof of human authenticity. A species that could accidentally inspire galactic awe through simple friendliness is being seen as remarkably pure in their intentions." This was not what Foster had expected. "Explain further." "Consider the psychology involved," Quellion continued. "Every other species in the galaxy has elaborate social protocols designed to navigate complex power relationships. But humans apparently created their greeting customs purely for social bonding, without any consideration of how they might be perceived by others. This is being interpreted as evidence of extraordinary moral clarity." The implications were starting to dawn on Foster. "You're saying they see our naivety as a virtue?" "More than that. Several species are beginning to view humanity as the only truly honest participants in galactic affairs. The Wisdom Keepers have declared that a species incapable of intentional deception in their basic social interactions represents a new form of evolutionary advancement." Over the next several days, as Professor Ixthak's research was formally presented to the galactic scientific community, the reactions proved to be far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Rather than universal anger or dismissal, the revelation created three distinct factions among galactic civilizations. The first group, primarily consisting of aggressive warrior species, initially felt humiliated and angry. The Krillian Empire's response was typical of this faction. War leader Thrax transmitted a formal statement to Earth demanding an explanation for what he called the Great Deception. However, when Ambassador Chen met with Thrax to explain the situation, his reaction surprised everyone. "You mean to tell me," the massive alien warrior said slowly, "that your species has no concept of tactical psychological manipulation in your basic social interactions?" "None whatsoever," Chen confirmed. "The handshake developed purely as a way for humans to show friendliness to each other." Thrax was silent for a long moment, then made a sound that Chen had learned was Krillian laughter. "This is even more impressive than we originally believed. A species so naturally confident that they never considered how their gestures might be interpreted by enemies. This suggests a level of innate fearlessness that surpasses even our understanding." The second faction, composed mainly of scientific and scholarly species, became intensely interested in studying human social development. The fact that humans had evolved such unique greeting customs without any awareness of their psychological impact fascinated researchers across the galaxy. The analytical collective itself issued a follow-up report declaring humanity to be the most scientifically significant species discovery in galactic history because they represented a completely different approach to social evolution. The third and most significant faction was made up of species that saw the revelation as proof of human moral superiority. The Dream Weavers, the Wisdom Keepers, and dozens of other civilizations began promoting what they called the human model of honest interaction. President Martinez addressed the situation in a carefully crafted message broadcast throughout the galaxy. "The people of Earth are grateful for the warm welcome we have received from the galactic community. We want to clarify that our greeting customs developed naturally over thousands of years as expressions of friendship and trust. We had no awareness that they would be interpreted as anything more significant until we encountered your remarkable civilizations." The speech continued, "We are humbled that our simple gesture of friendship has resonated so strongly with so many different species. This response has taught us that the desire for honest, peaceful interaction is truly universal." The reaction to Martinez's address was overwhelmingly positive. Rather than seeing humanity as deceptive, most species interpreted the explanation as evidence of human humility and authenticity. However, the situation was still fraught with danger. Several aggressive species, particularly the Iron Legion and the Razor Worlds, remained convinced that humanity was engaged in some form of elaborate psychological warfare. They began mobilizing military forces, preparing for what they saw as an inevitable human expansion campaign. The crisis came to a head when Admiral Vex 9 of the Iron Legion transmitted a formal challenge to Earth's military forces. "Human deceivers," the mechanical being declared, "your pathetic attempts at manipulation have been exposed. The Iron Legion challenges your species to prove your supposed superiority through honest combat." The transmission included tactical data showing a massive Iron Legion battle fleet moving toward Earth's solar system. The mechanical warriors were prepared to test human military capabilities directly, convinced that the handshake revelation was part of some elaborate strategic deception. As alarms sounded throughout Earth's defense network, Foster found himself facing the moment he had been dreading since the handshake phenomenon began. Humanity was about to be tested in the only way that mattered to certain species, through direct military confrontation. But, just as the Iron Legion fleet reached the edge of the solar system, something unprecedented happened. War leader Thrax of the Krillian Empire transmitted a message on all galactic frequencies. "Iron Legion forces," his voice carried the authority of one of the galaxy's most respected military commanders, "you will withdraw immediately. The humans are under the protection of the Krillian Empire." The transmission continued, "Any species that threatens humanity threatens the Krillian Empire. The humans have shown us something we did not know existed, the courage to be completely honest in all interactions. This is a treasure that must be protected." Within hours, similar declarations came from dozens of other civilizations. The Zephyrian Collective, the Wisdom Keepers, the Dream Weavers, and even the enigmatic Phantom Syndicate announced their support for humanity. Admiral Vex 9 found his battle fleet surrounded by ships from half a dozen different species, all united in their determination to protect the beings they had come to see as the galaxy's most valuable example of honest interaction. Faced with overwhelming opposition, the Iron Legion withdrew, but not before Vex 9 transmitted a final message. "This is not finished, humans. The galaxy may protect you now, but mechanical beings have long memories. Someday, your true nature will be revealed." As the immediate crisis passed, Foster realized that the revelation of the truth about the handshake had not destroyed humanity's position in the galaxy. Instead, it had transformed that position into something even more significant. Rather than being feared as a powerful military force, humans were now cherished as a moral example, the only species in the galaxy that had developed completely honest social interaction protocols. The question was whether humanity could live up to the impossible standards that the galaxy was now setting for them. 2 years after the truth about the human handshake was revealed, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Harmony, watching the most remarkable sight in galactic history unfold before her. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different civilizations moved in perfect formation around Earth's solar system, forming what had become known as the Guardian Fleet. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity had accidentally become the most protected species in the galaxy, not because of their military might, but because other civilizations viewed them as too precious to lose. The simple gesture of extending an open palm in friendship had transformed humanity from unknown newcomers into the galaxy's most cherished treasure. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Park reported from her station, "incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting your presence at the emergency session regarding the Devourers." Chen nodded grimly. The Devourers were a recently discovered species from the galaxy's outer rim, mechanical beings that consumed entire star systems to fuel their expansion. They had been approaching inhabited space for months, destroying everything in their path. Traditional military responses had proven useless against their overwhelming numbers and adaptive technology. As Chen's shuttle approached the Galactic Council station, she reflected on how much had changed since that first encounter with war leader Thrax. The revelation about the handshake's true meaning had not diminished humanity's influence, instead, it had transformed that influence into something unprecedented in galactic history. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every major civilization, all gathered to address the Devourer crisis. As Chen entered, conversations stopped and hundreds of alien eyes turned toward her. The weight of their expectations was almost tangible. Council Speaker Morthak, an ancient being from one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, called the session to order. We face a threat unlike any in recorded history. The Devourers have consumed 12 star systems and show no signs of slowing. All military responses have failed. The holographic display showed the devastating path of destruction. Entire worlds reduced to raw materials, star systems stripped of all resources, billions of lives lost in the mechanical being's relentless advance. Traditional warfare is useless, continued war leader Thrax, now serving as the Council's military advisor. The Devourers adapt to every weapon system we deploy. They learn from each encounter and become stronger. Speaker Morthak turned toward Chen. Captain Chen, representative of humanity, the Council asks for your species' guidance in this matter. Chen stood, acutely aware that every being in the chamber was looking to her for wisdom that she wasn't sure she possessed. Humanity had become the galaxy's moral compass, expected to provide solutions that others couldn't imagine. Honored representatives, Chen began, my species has learned that sometimes the most effective approach is the most unexpected one. She activated her own holographic display, showing detailed analysis of the Devourer encounters. Every response to the Devourers has been military in nature. We've tried to fight them, contain them, or destroy them. But, what if we tried something completely different? Professor Ixthak of the Analytical Collective leaned forward with interest. What do you propose, Captain? We try to communicate with them, Chen said simply. The reaction was immediate and intense. Representatives from warrior species made sounds of disbelief, while others began rapid discussions about the implications of such an approach. Captain, Admiral Vex 9 of the Iron Legion interjected, his mechanical voice carrying clear skepticism, the Devourers have shown no response to any communication attempts. They appear to be purely destructive entities. Have we tried the right kind of communication? Chen asked. Every attempt has been either a demand for them to stop their advance or a threat of military retaliation. What if we approached them differently? Dr. Vasquez, participating via holographic link from Earth, provided additional context. Captain Chen raises an important point. Our analysis suggests that the Devourers may not be inherently hostile. They're consuming resources, but they may not understand that they're destroying inhabited worlds in the process. The possibility that the galaxy-threatening crisis might be based on a misunderstanding was both hopeful and terrifying. If the Devourers weren't actively malicious, there might be a peaceful solution. But, if communication failed, the delay could cost millions more lives. Trade Master Quellion of the Trade Consortium raised a practical concern. Even if communication is possible, who could serve as a representative? The Devourers have destroyed every ship that approached them. The answer was obvious to everyone in the chamber, though many were reluctant to voice it. Finally, Speaker Morthak said what they were all thinking. The humans would need to make the approach. Chen felt a chill of understanding. The galaxy's faith in humanity's ability to communicate peacefully with any species had grown to the point where they were expected to risk their lives attempting dialogue with beings that had destroyed everything they encountered. We would need to send someone who embodies human diplomatic principles, Chen said carefully. Someone who can demonstrate our commitment to peaceful resolution. What she didn't say, but everyone understood, was that whoever made the approach would almost certainly not return. The Devourers had shown no mercy to any previous contact attempts. Over the next several days, as plans were formulated and discussed, Chen found herself repeatedly approached by representatives from various civilizations, all asking the same question in different ways: would humanity sacrifice one of their own to attempt communication with an apparently hopeless enemy? The answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Rodriguez, who had become Earth's most experienced diplomat through her work at Crossroads Point, volunteered for the mission. This is what humans do, she explained to the assembled council. We extend our hand in greeting, even when we don't know how it will be received. The risk of failure doesn't change our obligation to try. The mission preparations took weeks, with the best scientific minds in the galaxy working to design a ship that could survive long enough to deliver a peaceful message to the Devourers. The vessel was equipped with every form of communication technology known to galactic civilization, along with massive redundant systems to keep broadcasting even if the ship was being destroyed. But, the most important element of the mission was Rodriguez herself. She would approach the Devourers alone, unarmed, broadcasting humanity's message of peaceful contact. If anyone could succeed in this impossible task, it was the woman who had demonstrated the human handshake to hundreds of alien species. As the mission ship, appropriately named the Extended Hand, prepared to depart, Rodriguez recorded a message for the galaxy. To all the civilizations watching this mission, remember that the greatest victories are often achieved not through force, but through understanding. If we can communicate with the Devourers, we may not only end this crisis but prevent future ones. The journey to the Devourer fleet took 3 days. During that time, reports continued to arrive of worlds being consumed, star systems being stripped bare, and refugee populations fleeing the mechanical advance. The pressure to find a military solution grew with each passing hour. But, when the Extended Hand finally encountered the Devourer fleet, something unprecedented happened. Rodriguez began broadcasting her message on all frequencies, in every language known to galactic civilization. To the beings known as Devourers, this is Ambassador Elena Rodriguez representing humanity and all peaceful civilizations of this galaxy. We come not as enemies, but as neighbors who wish to understand. For the first time in recorded history, the Devourer fleet stopped moving. The massive mechanical ships, each one larger than most space stations, hung motionless as Rodriguez continued her broadcast. We believe that there has been a misunderstanding between our species. You have been consuming inhabited worlds, but we do not believe this is your intention. We wish to communicate with you to prevent further loss of life. What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for centuries to come. The Devourer ships began reconfiguring themselves, mechanical components shifting and rearranging until the lead vessel had formed something recognizable, a crude approximation of a humanoid shape. Then, impossibly, the mechanical being spoke. Small organic entity, the voice was like the sound of grinding metal, but clearly intelligent. Your communication method is unknown to us. You approach without weapons, without threat displays, without dominance assertions. Explain this behavior. Rodriguez felt her heart racing as she realized that first contact with the Devourers was actually succeeding. Among my species, this is how we greet those we wish to know better. We call it peaceful contact. Peaceful contact, the Devourer repeated the word slowly. This concept is not in our databases. We encounter only species that flee or attack. You do neither. Over the next several hours, Rodriguez engaged in the most important conversation in galactic history. She learned that the Devourers were not malicious entities, but rather a collective intelligence that had never encountered true peaceful contact. They consumed resources because they had always assumed that was the natural state of interaction between different forms of life. In our observations, the lead Devourer explained, all organic species compete for resources through violence or territorial expansion. We concluded that consumption was the appropriate method of interaction. But, what if there were other ways to interact? Rodriguez asked. What if species could share resources and knowledge instead of competing for them? The concept was revolutionary to beings who had only known conflict. As Rodriguez explained human concepts of cooperation, trade, and mutual benefit, she could see the Devourer ship's configuration changing, its mechanical components adapting to process entirely new categories of thought. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez performed the gesture that had started everything. Despite being in a spaceship, she held her hand up to the communication screen, palm open, fingers spread in the universal human greeting. This is how humans show that we mean no harm, she explained. We show our most useful appendage in a vulnerable position, demonstrating trust. The Devourer ship's response was immediate and stunning. Mechanical appendages emerged from the vessel's hull.